But first, today the Prime Minister was sounding tough about the so-called ISIS brides that his government has previously welcomed back into Australia. Here he is this morning on the ABC.
We won't repatriate them. My mother would have said, if you make your bed, you lie in it. These are people who went overseas supporting Islamic State and went there to provide support for people who basically want a caliphate.
So they're not coming back, the Prime Minister seems to be saying, or at least that's what he wants Australians to think. Because believe me, on Labor's past form, these Islamic State collaborators are coming back to this country. And they're reportedly being helped all the way from Syria to Sydney by none other than one of the Immigration Minister Tony Burke's strongest supporters, Muslim community leader and GP, Dr. Jamal Rifi. But let's go back to the Prime Minister today, because after sounding tough, you make your bed, you lie in it sort of tough, he then said this, and I want you to notice here the shift in his language.
Of course, Australian law applies and there are obligations that Australian officials have, but we want to make it clear as well, as we have to the people involved, that if there are any breaches of the law, then they will face the full force of the Australian law.
So if they are here, or when they are here, he says, quote, they will face the full force of the law. Or will they? Because what is this full force of the law under Albanese? What does that look like? We already know from the last lot of ISIS women that Labor allowed back into Australia that there were no serious consequences, despite the fact that they all broke Australian law when they left this country to go and join a listed terrorist organisation. That was the law a decade ago, and it is still the law now. We also know that Labor held secret meetings with activist groups like Save the Children to help get these women and children back to this country by issuing them passports while denying in the Parliament that any assistance was given.
A non-government organisation took this government to court demanding that we repatriate these people. Fact 2, they lost that court case. Fact 3, we did not repatriate these people.
These individuals received what they were entitled to by law, no more and no less. No more and no less.
Well, despite that big voice and bluster from Burke, despite those words in the House, in documents obtained via Senate estimates, we know that the Immigration Minister, Tony Burke, held a secret meeting in his Punchbowl electorate office in June 2024 with the said Dr. Jamal Rifi, Save the Children CEO Matt Tinkler, and an advocate, Carmeli Debussy. So for all the denials, we know there was assistance, because there's no greater assistance a government can give anyone overseas than access to a valid passport. And once back here on Australian soil, we also know these individuals were allowed to live freely in the community, with their unsuspecting neighbours none the wiser. Now, the government says they're all subject to, quote, voluntary orders and active monitoring. But what's that mean in practice, given we know there's over 18,000 people on ASIO's terror watch list in this country? And I can assure you, ASIO doesn't have the resources to watch 1,800, let alone 18,000.
You look at the number of people that ASIO have on that watch list that we keep talking about. Do you know how many that is, Peter? That is over 18,000 people now that ASIO has on its watch list. It is literally physically impossible for that agency to keep an eye on everyone.
You be the judge. Yesterday, almost by accident, we learned about the latest cohort of Islamic State women and children, 34 in total, so-called the brides of the terrorist and the caliphate, cubs of the caliphate and brides of the terrorists, who have reportedly left camps in Syria to head for Beirut, where they would use these new Albanese government-issued passports to fly back to Australia. Today, due to issues, we're told, with some of the men that are accompanying them, they have been turned back to the camp in Syria. But make no mistake, without a change in policy from the Prime Minister, sooner or later, they will get to Beirut and they will get to Australia. Now, forget that line from the Prime Minister today that his government is not repatriating these women. That's a lie. They may not be flying the plane that'll bring them here, but with a passport that the government has issued, the PM is effectively putting out the welcome mat, and every Australian horrified by the terror attack at Bondi is right to demand answers as to why. It was only yesterday in a court in Sydney that police tendered evidence that in the car of one of the alleged Bondi gunmen was an Islamic State flag. And now we're on the verge of bringing back to this country 34 people who have lived this horrific ideology for over a decade. Now, I do not care that they are women or children. I've had plenty of security briefings in the past where the bomb makers, the online recruiters, and the suicide bombers have been women. You don't think that women can't be terrorists? You don't think that women don't sign up to jihad? The Prime Minister needs his head read if he thinks that gender's any protection from radical Islam. Or the fact that coming home with these women are children. After all, 1/3 of those in de-radicalisation programs in Australia right now are individuals under the age of 18. Today, the opposition called for exclusion orders to be issued against them.
If this government isn't even willing to temporarily prevent these people from coming back to the country, then are they really interested in our national security? Are they really taking seriously the issue of Islamic State and what it does to our society here and the risk it presents? No, they're not.
Sure, some will say permanently excluding them is tough, but we've got to get tough. If you import hatred, you get hatred. If you import terrorist sympathisers, you ultimately get terrorism. What we will never get from the Albanese government is strong action to keep Australia safe, because it's too scared of losing the Islamist vote in the seats of cabinet ministers. That's what's at the heart of all of this. The vote in those seats and the growing block of Muslim votes inside the Labor Party that under the rules will get to vote in any future leadership contest. But as weak as the Prime Minister might be on border security, tonight it's his Immigration Minister Tony Burke who has serious questions to answer, given the reported involvement of one of his strongest supporters, Dr. Jamal Rifi, in this mission to bring these terrorist sympathisers back to Australia. And here is Rifi, with my colleague Andrew Clennell, defending his mate Tony Burke as the founder of the Friends of Burke Muslim Cheer Squad.
I've spoken with the wise men and women in our community, and they felt strongly that we need to support Tony because he supported the community and local constituent for many years.
I bet my bottom dollar Tony Burke is up to his eyeballs in all of this. Just as he slipped out to the airport to meet the latest plane load of Gazans, Burke will be across everything that's happening with these ISIS women. If you want to know why I think Labor can be beaten, it is this issue. Yes, the Liberals need to get their act together and they've got to take the gloves off after being far too soft on immigration for far too long. But believe me, if Labor thinks Australians are going to cop this, they are mistaken. I think people are well and truly alive to what's happening here. They are watching what's happening around the Western world, and they see it now all through the prism of our Bondi debt. And quite honestly, Australians have had enough.